Welcome to all to this talk. Thank you for joining us. So my name is Dimitra. I work at TotalEnergies for the power R&D as a data scientist. And today I'm going to present some of our use cases. So basically how AI and digital technologies can be applied in energy sobriety topics. So my talk will be about empowering individuals to reduce and decarbonize their electricity use in an automated way. So before starting on the subject, I wanted to introduce a bit the power R&D at TotalEnergies. We have 4 different R&D programs, which are related to the clean electricity value chain. So it's wind, solar, hybrid and storage, and distributed energy resources. And the team I'm part of is called Numeric at Paris-Saclay, and has a lot of different technical expertise in numerical skills like AI, modelization, numerical simulation and optimization, and also development. And this team aims to provide technical expertise, project leadership, and execution in those areas to support the innovation across the clean electricity value chain and accelerate those activities in the company. So now let's start with a bit of context. So my presentation will go this way. First, I will introduce you to the context. Then we'll go through two business case studies, and then I will conclude. So the electricity grid is currently undergoing a significant transformation because of the decarbonization of the energy value chain. So there are 2 things: electricity supply. 2 things are transforming: the electricity supply, the production, and the electricity demand, which is the consumption. On the electricity production side, there is more and more penetration of renewable energies production, which is good, but because renewables are intermittent, they depend on weather conditions, this is increasing the volatility of electricity production. And the electricity demand also has some transformation because there is more and more electricity demand because EVs are electric vehicles are developing. There are also other uses, electricity uses that appear and that increase, like electric heating devices, air conditioners, and more. And this increases the variability and the uncertainty of load shapes. At all times, the electricity grid needs to match electricity supply to demand. This is called grid balancing. And this task is becoming increasingly challenging because of this significant transformation. So changing the way we use electricity, changing the way we consume electricity impacts both grid stability and carbon footprint. And this is about energy sobriety. So energy sobriety is about changes in individual and collective behavior aimed at saving energy and saving this energy at the right time. So why is it so important today? I'll give you 2 reasons. First, because of in the short term, because of reliability of electricity supply. Because of the energy crisis in Europe, there is a shortage of electricity supply. So reducing our electricity consumption at times of peak demand leads to better grid stabilization and avoids power blackouts. And in the longer term, it's important for sustainability reasons. because energy is a large part of global greenhouse gas emissions. It's more than 70%. And this is related not only to the way we produce electricity, energy, but also the hour we consume it. As displayed on the graph on the right, the CO2 emissions vary according to the hour of the day, because the electricity supply is, for example, in midday, the electricity supply is more about renewable energies. So if we reduce the electricity consumption at times of high carbon intensity of electricity supply, then we have lower kind of carbon footprint, and we can facilitate the deployment of renewables. And this will be increasingly important in the future. So this is in a 2040 sustainable development scenario. This will be increasingly important as the renewables will develop more and more in the future. So in this context, we need more and more flexibility to reduce or shift our electricity consumption when needed. So what is flexibility? Flexibility is a portion of electricity consumption that can be reduced or shifted across time of day while maintaining the quality and value of end-use services. So a simple example, you have the original electricity consumption here in red. You have a flexibility activation time slot, and during this time slot, the electricity consumption will be reduced. And after that, you will have most likely a rebound effect, so more consumption. Where can flexibility sources be found? For a long time, the grid had contracts directly with industrial plants, for example, in order to reduce their electricity use at times of peak demand when needed. But now, as there are more and more controllable electrical assets in our homes, or controllable electrical assets that we use, like EV chargers, we can also, the grid can also leverage the power reduction from those electrical assets from individual users. So in this presentation, I'm going to focus on this kind of controllable electrical assets, EV charging and heating devices, which are assets used by individual users. So we have on one side individual users and their controllable electrical assets, EV charging and heating devices in our case. So these can be flexibility providers by reducing or shifting their electricity consumption. On the other side, you have the power grid operator that needs to balance electricity supply to electricity demand and reduce the carbon footprint of electricity supply. To unlock the potential of flexibility, there is a need of an intermediary actor, which is called the flexibility aggregator. That can be TotalEnergies, that can be some other company, of course. And so this flexibility aggregator will leverage different digital technologies to make that possible. So IoT and assets management to manage all the assets individually. It will require to connect to databases, data science engines, dashboarding, etc., etc. This flexibility aggregator, we have contracts with the users and with the grid to tell to the grid, okay, we can provide that much flexibility on this day, and to the users to to have a contract to agree on the terms. And so this not only can reduce or shift the electricity use, and it's also creating value for all the parties involved. So for the individual users, it can lower their electricity bills and lower their carbon footprint reduction, and all this in an automated way. For the flexibility aggregator, it can give them revenue from these flexibility services. And for the grid, it provides a way to stabilize the power grid and to lower the greenhouse gas emissions, because they won't need to produce more electricity from fossil fuels in case of peak, for example. So this creates value for all the parties involved. So now we are going to deep dive more into controllable home heating and then controllable EV charging through two business case studies based on data. So theoretically, by controlling a group of heating devices, it's possible to significantly reduce or shift part of their total consumption when the grid needs it. Although several questions arise. How much flexibility can be achieved with a given number of heating devices? That must be modeled. How does this flexibility vary given the outdoor temperature and the moment of the day? Will individual users feel a significant drop in their indoor temperature when their heating devices are switched off? And finally, how long do we have to wait after a flexibility activation to schedule another one on the same heating device? Because you need to wait for the required time for the room to come back to the set point temperature. So we did a data-driven study, which objective was to model how much consumption can be reduced or shifted at each time slot of a day from a group of heating devices. For this study, we had available, so we had like 147 households in these studies that had in total almost 700 heating devices spread out in France. And we had for each heating device its consumption, so time series of consumption, and the temperature, the indoor temperature of the room, and the set point temperature set by the customer through the days. Between 2018 and 2021, so for almost 3 years. And so this, all of those heating devices represented 900 kilowatts of installed power. So we're going to see that not all of the installed power of a group of heating devices can be reduced or shifted because first, the heating devices are not continuously heating up. We plotted here the share of heating devices, that are heating up at the same time over the winter period from October to April. And this share is varies from 0 to 35%. So it's not so much. And even on the colder days, the average is about 20%. and the average over the winter period is 10%. So it's really not so much as we compared to that that we could expect. And also, so this share is inversely correlated with the outdoor temperature. So the colder it is, the more heating devices are heating at the same time, which is logic. Second reason, the flexibility, so the activation duration of flexibility is typically of 30 minutes. But a heating device is not necessarily heating up for 30 minutes. It may be heating up for less. So that's a second constraint. And on this graph, we can see that actually 35% of heating activation lasts 30 minutes or more. And third reason, this is more individual user constraints. When we switch off a heating device, we don't want to deviate too much from the user's set point temperature, because when it will be switched off, the indoor temperature of the room will decrease, but we cannot let it decrease too much. How much is acceptable? For example, 0.5 degrees is maybe acceptable. More, maybe not. So for that, we need from the data to learn how fast the indoor temperature decreases in each home and each room of the individual users. And so here we plotted the distribution of heat losses in 1 hour among all the users' room. So some of them have a very little heat losses, 0.1 degrees in 1 hour. It's pretty acceptable. It's very, very acceptable. The house must be well isolated, and some others have really higher heat losses. But on average, it's 0.5 degrees Celsius for an indoor and outdoor temperature difference of 15 degrees. So all of these constraints can be found on the consumption and heating profile of a typical individual user. Here we'll take an example of a house, of an apartment with 2 occupants and a heating device located in the living room. For this heating device, there are 0.68 degrees of loss in 1 hour. So it's in the it's situated here, so it's more than the average. And let's look at the power consumption across a day, and also at the temperatures, so in the set point temperature in green, and the indoor temperature that is following the set point and depending on the activation and disactivation of the heating device. So we can find all of the constraints that we listed before. There are periods where there is no heating, typically during the night. There are periods where heating lasts less than 30 minutes. And when the heating device is switched off, like here, the temperature is decreasing at some rate. So when looking at the power consumption of one individual heating device, there is high variability. It's on and off, but the power consumption is smoothed over the aggregated consumption of a group of heating devices, like shown here. When we are aggregating 457 heating devices, we are pretty sure that at all times of the day, you at least have a minimum power consumption. And you actually can also have some patterns, daily patterns that appear. Also, what we see is that this aggregated power consumption is really correlated to the outdoor temperature. And that enables us to statistically estimate the aggregated consumption given the outdoor temperature. For example, this red line means that there is 95% chance that the aggregated consumption is greater than these values. And the green one means that 85% chance that the aggregated consumption is greater. So flexibility depends on many things: on the number of heating devices considered, on the time in the day, on outdoor temperatures, on the activation duration, and on the user constraints. So user constraints would be how much we can deviate from the set point temperature. And all of this can be modeled. So we can model the flexibility across day as a function of all of these variables. And so that's what we did. So we made a tool where you can input a number of heating devices in the portfolio of your choice. Instead of outdoor temperatures, we created types of days based on the outdoor temperatures, like very cold, cold, etc. Extreme is a reference type of day, like very cold one with a given outdoor temperatures. Flexibility activation durations, 30 or 60 minutes. Maximum deviation to the set point temperature varying from 0.5 to 3 degrees. And so given a set of input assumptions, we can model how much flexibility can be achieved at each time slot of a day. So that's what we see here. For each half-hourly time slot, we can model that we can have this much flexibility if we activate at this time slot. And this can be given with a given confidence percentage. So that means we are 80%, in this case, we are 80% sure that the value will be at least this one. But we can also give it with a confidence interval. Like the value can vary from this value to this maximum value. The limit of this approach is that we can model the flexibility on a particular time slot, but not taking into account the fact that another flexibility activation could have occurred before. And as we saw in the beginning, if we activate flexibility, there is most likely a rebound effect after, which impacts the consumption and the flexibility potential later in the day. So we use a different, so for that we need to use a different modeling approach, which takes as an input the flexibility activation time slots. In this example, we took 3 time slots, 7 a.m., noon, and 7 p.m. And then the indoor temperature variation and power variation needs to be modeled for these flexibility activations. And here we can see that the rebound effect is well modeled. Like there is a difference between the consumption without flexibility and the consumption with flexibility activations. So to wrap up on this first business use case, to unlock the potential of flexibility from heating devices, we need to anticipate and to be able to model the flexibility potential and the load, but also be able to dispatch in real time. So so we need to anticipate in order to give to the grid operator how much flexibility we can provide, but also to dispatch in real time on the flexibility day to provide really this flexibility. And so for the modeling and forecasting part, AI and data science are the skills needed. But for the other parts, like the dispatch and also the connection to the assets, there are other skills that need to be involved, like optimization and back and front development. So let's move on to the second business use case. Just checking the time. So controllable EV charging. So there are several ways to deliver the same charge to an electric vehicle. Let's take this example on the left of an EV charging scenario. So typically a user leaves his home in the morning to go to work. So he goes with his electric vehicle, his battery discharges, he plugs in at work his electric vehicle to charge it, and he unplugs when he leaves at 5 p.m. So during this session of this charging session, there is just the charging occurs just at the beginning, and then there is a large portion of the time that is an inactivity time of charging. So it's called idle time. And so basically the idea of flexibility in the case of EV charging is that we can shift the charge later in the session without impacting the charge of the EV and the time the user needs to leave. So the difference between the time required to charge at maximum power and the time an EV is parked left gives us flexibility. So how to coordinate EV charging and unlock the potential of flexibility? I'm going to propose you three steps to do that. First, analysis of EV charging behavior, then anticipation of EV charging load, and third, establishing a control strategy to coordinate EV charging. First, let's have an overview of the EV charging data. So typically, there are some IDs, ID of the session, of the charging session, ID of the charging point, that's called an EVSE. Then we have at least two date times, the start date of the session and the stop date. Then charge information, consumption, total consumption of the session, max power of the charging point, and max power of that occurred during the session, and the locations of the charging point. EV chargers can be located at different places, and that impacts a lot the charging patterns. So for example, they can be located at home. They can be located in the street, so that's public charging, and they can be located at the workplaces. And so in the following slides, we are going to focus more on the public and the workplace charging. which are both really different in terms of usage you're going to see. So first, analysis of EV charging behavior. Here, it's the case of public EV charging. And we want to see when the EV charging demand is high. We plot the daily load curves, so all the daily load curves on the same graph to see at which hours the demand is high. Typically, so the daily load curves are usually stable, as we can see here. They follow the same trends. And there are two main peaks, one at midday and one evening peak. The main one is the evening, after 8 p.m. And when we plot the weekly average load curves, we see, so this one is Sunday and this one is Saturday. During the week, it looks pretty much the same as a pattern. And the weekend, it's a bit different. So there is a weekday weekend pattern for public EV charging, but not that much different. In the case of workplace EV charging, let's see what is the charging activity of EV users. We can plot the distribution of EV arrival and departure times. On weekdays, it's very clear. So the main usage is is that users arrive from 7 to 9 a.m. in the morning and leave in the afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. On weekends, there's much less activity. So if you look at the number of sessions, this is not even comparable. And so we can say that EV workplace charging occurs more during weekdays. So these days are the ones we could use flexibility. And then let's see how much inactivity time there is across all EV charging sessions. This is the idle time. So plotting the distributions, the mean idle time for workplace EV charging sessions is of 4 hours, which can clearly gives us flexibility. So next step, anticipate EV charging load. So this is a forecasting use case on public EV charging. We want to forecast the aggregated power of all the EV chargers, all the public EV chargers of our choice. The horizon would be 2 days ahead and 1 day ahead forecast in order to enhance 2 days ahead in order to anticipate the load, and 1 day ahead a refresh to get more accurate results, hopefully. The granularity would be half hourly and frequency daily. So every day we do these day plus 1 and day plus 2 forecasts. For that, we are building a training data set from various features. So typically, we can build features from calendar data, from the start and the start dates, for example. So you can extract the month, the day of week, as we saw. It's important. The time step, if it is a weekend or a weekday, if it's a public or school holiday, if it's a day before public or school holiday, etc. And you can build also features from historical data, so from the power of the day before until 1 week before at the same time step. then you can build different features based on averages of previous days at the same time step. You can be really creative on this historical data features. Modeling approach would be a regression. So the goal would be to find a function such as the power is a function of these variables, these features, so calendar and historic. And the approach we used to find the most accurate F, at least the approach that worked the best, was a grid search training done on tree-based method like GBM. So a lot of models were trained using this grid search. And the most accurate one on a validation set is selected based on the metric of our choice, which can be mean absolute error, mean squared error, etc. This has to be defined by the business. Results. So some example of results that we have for 2 days ahead forecasting. So here we trained the model with data of several months, and we tested with 1 week of data to see how our model performs. And these are the results. So the model performs pretty well. The predictions follow the daily trends. But the limit is that during the peak hours, it's usually underestimated and overestimated at the hours of low demand. So this is something that we could enhance in the future. So to provide daily forecasts, to provide daily forecast, you need to make an automated forecasting pipeline because you're getting data, new data every day, and so every day you get new data. You need to pre-process and do the feature engineering, and so we used a tool called Databricks to make this possible, to make this automated forecasting pipeline. With this tool we can train several models and select automatically the model that works best, and then this model can be used for the daily forecasts without being retrained necessarily every day. And when the accuracy monitoring tells us that the accuracy decreases, the model can be retrained and more features can be built. But this is a way to do it in an automated way in production. Lastly, establish a control strategy to coordinate EV charging. In this use case, we wanted to minimize the carbon impact by coordinating EV charging. So we had access to carbon intensity of electricity supply, forecast of carbon intensity of electricity supply, which is this curve here. We had access to the solar generation in red here, and the power, the EV charging use. And so we, by considering users' departure hours, charging time, solar production forecast, and this CO2 intensity of electricity supply, we saw that EV charging coordination can reduce average hourly carbon emissions. Like you see in this graph, if we shift this use later in the day, we can make it coincide with solar production, which reduces the hourly carbon emissions by 20% in this case study. So to wrap up also on this business use case, so same principle, to unlock the potential of flexibility for EV charging, we need to well anticipate the load and the flexibility potential, and also be able to dispatch in real time the EV charging. So now let's conclude. A few key takeaways. So the rapid digitalization of our homes and electricity uses are an opportunity to reduce or shift electricity demand from peak and carbon intensive hours of the day, and rewarding the individual users for their flexibility. There's more and more connected appliances, such as heating devices and EVs, that can be aggregated together and their electricity use controlled remotely and in an automated way. And this can be made possible by actors like flexibility aggregators that can leverage AI and digital technologies to learn individual users' behavior, estimate flexibility potential, perform forecasts, dispatch in real time. So as you saw, there are many applications of AI and digital technologies for energy sobriety. So I think I'm done. I have a few minutes left for Q&A. And thank you very much. I wanted to take the chance to wish you a happy new year.